Hello to all of our listeners out there. This is Rabbi Pinchas Landis of Partners Cleveland, here with my illustrious, esteemed, bountiful, wise, brilliant, and all the other great adjectives you can think of if you have another thesaurus co-host, Rabbi Gamliel Nassim Spiro, and we're back with another episode of the Rabbi's Podcast. So, Rabbi Spiro, first of all, how are you doing there today? Everything's good?
Hashem, Rabbi Landis. How are you?
So good. This should be
last week of the introduction.
You know, you gotta hook them with the introduction. So we have to just keep making the introduction better and better, and we're thinking of new ways to introduce each other. So, but before we dive into all the great, wonderful, amazing thoughts we're going to talk about today, since our last episode, Rabbi Spiro, you've been like all over the world. You've literally been like, I think, where were you? New Zealand? Is that where you went?
In Aurora, Ohio. If your thing is off the rack discount mall shopping, Aurora, Ohio is your place.
Wow.
And
okay.
The yeshiva went there for Shavuos, not to the mall. We went to a hotel. It was amazing Shavuos. We got away. It was isolated in our own little bubble, and it was an amazing Shavuos. Amazing learning, davening, amazing like just achdus, chevra being together, the bachrim being together, the Amei and our wives. Really beautiful. And then we came back and we went on a yeshiva trip. And still we went to... So
I want to stop you there for a moment before the yeshiva trip might be too exciting for you. I want to stop you there for a moment. So, Rabbi Spiro, I know that you usually daven at the later minyan on Shavuos. Did they make a later minyan just for you?
Great question. This has been a question that was on many people's mind before Shavuos. And I don't know if I said this, but I'll say it now. Hashem's paying me back. When I was a kid, we grew up in Philadelphia, went to LMS, and my father would stay up the whole night. And then whatever grade it was, 7th, 8th grade, my father told me, I can't do it anymore. And he stopped staying up. And my other memory of Shavuos is running over to me at like 4:30 in the morning. He said to me, you haven't learned one word the entire night? And he gave me an art scroll Akdamas. He said, why don't you learn through this? I was like, art scroll Akdamas. Akdamas is inscrutable, very hard to learn, and especially when I was 11 or 12. Anyway, last year my father said I can't stay up anymore. I gave him a very hard time about it. I said, Daddy, everybody stays up. It's so embarrassing. And now I'm that embarrassing person. I can't stay up anymore. I don't know what got into me. That's just a few years already. I can't stay up all night. I usually learn until about 3:34. Then I go to sleep down with later minyan. So it was Siyata D'Shmaya. I went to sleep this year at about 4. I told one of the bachrim, come to my room and wake me up. And I said the door will be open. Just knocked on the door. And he came to the room apparently. He said that the door was not open at all. He didn't want to knock. So I woke up a little later. But we had a later minyan.
You know, Rabbi Spiro, I have been thinking about you a lot lately on Shavuos because now that I'm firmly over the hill, I also, I took a nice nap after Shavuos this year. Like I did all the precautions to be able to stay up and learn well, and also like 3:30 in the morning, I'm just like, I didn't have a chavrusa from that point on the rest of the night, and it was just like very, very hard. So it makes me question like the whole staying up thing, right, wrong, I don't know. Whatever it is, I put my head down on the table.
By the way, I just want to tell you, for the record, I'm very pro staying up. I think it's the idea of you're showing. It's not a question of quantify more hours, less hours. It's about the passion, showing that you have a passion and want to stay up. I'm very pro staying up. What can I do? I've become a big win.
Or to quote Tzvi Berkowitz, he said, I remember he used to say it so beautifully. He said the whole custom of staying up on Shavuos is because when you're in love, you do crazy things. I think it's such a great idea. Such a great idea.
I actually also Erev Shavuos, I was walking around the hotel, getting making sure the hotel is severely understaffed, and I was like walking room to room to making sure the rooms were set up. I really was. I didn't get to take a nap.
Did you play like bellhop, like take the bachrim stuff?
I had one of those little naps on, and Um, I was very big. I didn't get to take a nap after Shavuos, so but yeah, Baruch Hashem, it was a great Shavuos, and yeah, well, what else can I say? It was an amazing Shavuos. Libby was our caterer, came with us. The food was amazing.
Check him out. Libby. Does Libby have a last name?
Glick,
Glick. I never knew that. I thought it was just Libby.
just Libby.
So
But
yeah, yeah.
amazing
Anyhow,
food. Made lamb the first night, which was phenomenal. Amazing food.
by the way, I was speaking to Rabbi Tannenbaum from NCSY because I think they were there the week after you, and he said you left your mashed potatoes. So if you want to go back and pick them up, I think they're
Really,
still there. Just FYI.
I would do
Yeah,
that.
he said you left your mashed potatoes. AJ Kushner left his matzahs. He found all the stuff from the previous Jewish groups that had been there. So,
So I'll definitely go back and get my mashed potatoes. I didn't realize you left them there. 100%.
anyhow,
Leave no
so
mashed
so that
potato
shows.
behind. It's always been my motto.
So that shows. I'm glad to hear that you had a beautiful show. So tell me about the trip to where was it? Zimbabwe? You guys
This
went
year,
to?
West Virginia. Whitewater rafting, ATVing, biking, uh, going on a ski lift without the bar in the front of us. Uh, we went to a lunatic asylum, an abandoned lunatic asylum. I'm serious. It was actually, very disturbing part of the trip. And when we
Really?
were in Northern California a couple years ago, we went to Alcatraz, and Alcatraz was amazing. I've been to
Oh
other.
yeah, Alcatraz is probably cool.
It's what?
I say Alcatraz is probably cool.
Very cool. Abandoned jails are cool
Now,
because
when you're in Alcatraz, didn't the Buckroom lock you up and you have to try and escape?
they tried to.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
tried to put me in the hole,
No.
solitary confinement. So abandoned jails are a lot of fun. This was an abandoned insane asylum, and they have tours there, and it's an incredibly cruel place.
Hmm.
And I was actually, I don't know, very ambivalent. People, they treated these people, they were money makers for the state. The state would get money from the federal government. So they would basically, this is talking about it was opened in 1860, closed like 1980. They would basically
Right.
take people who were poor and orphans and kind of lock them up. It's a brutally sad place. And it was not such a fun part of the
Hmm.
trip, actually. But it was a great trip, though. And the Actus was great. Stayed right above the Blue Ridge Mountains. The people in West Virginia are serious rednecks, and you know,
But you know how West Virginia became a state, right?
I don't remember. It was during the Civil War, right? No,
Basically,
it
the
was before the
North
Civil.
conquered half of Virginia. Yeah, yeah, I think it's right. Yeah, but the North conquered half of Virginia, and they split it off into a separate state. That's basically what happened. Yeah, that's essentially how it got there, And then I think Virginia was one of the first states to fall, anyways, if I remember correctly. Maryland, no, Maryland was part of the Union,
It was a Confederate
but
state.
Virginia was a Confederate state because that was the whole thing that there was a a very talented army soldier from Virginia, and he was not pro-slavery, but it was unclear which way he was going to go. Was he going to go with his home state, or was he going to go with the Union? And it was back and forth and back and forth. And to try and sway him, he was offered the position of the chief of staff of the Union Army, which ultimately he did not take, and ended up becoming the chief of staff of the Confederacy. And his name is Robert E. Lee.
Robert E. Lee, sure.
Interestingly enough, but anyhow, so West Virginia, don't they say West Virginia's for lovers? Oh, that's Virginia. I don't know what's West Virginia for.
It is for rednecks, but it's a gorgeous, gorgeous state. It's right near, like I said, but we got a beautiful house in Airbnb, like 14 bedrooms, really beautiful place, right above the Blue Ridge Mountains. It rained one day, and we looked outside the window, and the clouds were under us, and it was
Oh
just
wow,
just beautiful. Great trip.
the Landis have vacationed many times in the Smoky Mountains, which is part of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that's what it's like. You go up like regularly in the different hills or mountains of the Smokies. You're below you're above the clouds. It's a very cool feeling.
The
So
Shiach is
you're
not
gonna love
here by
that feeling.
next year, so we do plan. I think we're going to do out west again. I'm thinking maybe the Grand Canyon again. I don't know. We'll have to decide. It'd be Yellowstone, but out west, eastern part of the country. I've said this many times on the podcast. Does not compare to the western part of the country. It just doesn't compare. Having
Well,
said that,
once
I
you're going
think
to the western part of the country, why don't you go to Midway? You ever thought about going to Midway for your yeshiva trip?
where is Midway?
Midway is that island like that's off the coast of Hawaii, where the decisive battle for the Pacific Theater of World War
Oh,
II took
that
place in
Midway?
1942.
That's way too far. We're
Yeah,
not going that far.
not to mention there's nothing there.
There was
There's
one
literally an
year when
army
the
base.
Buckram really wanted to go badly to Iceland. Remember WoW when WoW was in business, $400
Yeah,
flights to
yeah.
Iceland. So the guys were all set on going to Iceland, and it never. For that year we went to California instead, and then WoW went out of business, so it never worked out.
Exactly. Well, it only lasted about 5 minutes. So
Right.
anyhow, but the yeshiva trips is a wonderful. I think it's really just a beautiful part of one of the many beautiful things the yeshiva Sabbas Torah does. These trips with the Bachram, where you go to wonderful places, you bond, you bond and you bond and you go to insane asylums. So it's great. It's
We have
beautiful.
huge barbecues
So
every night. We get from a sheikhet in Baltimore. Yeah, pounds and pounds of steak, skirt steak, hanger steak. It's ribs. It's good stuff.
so straight from the shochet, you got.
Straight from the sheikhet.
So what's his name? He used to learn in yeshiva. He helps you with it. Who's now in Baltimore?
Who Rafi
The one
Myers.
yeah.
So now
Does Rafi help you with
it's
that?
his guy named Shimon Chaskelson. Yeah, he doesn't help. We call him directly, and we usually find someone from Baltimore who deliver it to us. And yeah, Baruch Hashem,
Beautiful. Beautiful.
it's good
Okay. Well,
stuff.
awesome. So that's very spirit. It's been an exciting few weeks. I'm a little jealous, I must say.
Exhausting, but extremely exciting, extremely productive. Baruch Hashem, really amazing, really amazing.
So I'd
I'm
like
very
to.
grateful. I want
So,
to
so
say publicly to state my gratitude to Hashem, keeping everyone safe, healthy, both Shavuos and the trip. I just saw say a beautiful idea from Reb Chaim Volozhner's Talmud. He quotes from Hallel. Says, "Ma shiv la Hashem kol tag malay alai." How can I repay Hashem for all He has done for me? He explains what does kol tag malay alai mean. All that He has been goimel me, He's constantly doing for me. And even when I thank Him, and even by doing more mitzvahs, then that's also just it's more. I owe Him after that. More chesed He's done for me. So he says, what can you do? Kais Yeshuas Esav Hashem Hashem Ekra. Lift up your kais and thank Hashem. Just the idea of thanking Hashem is the showing that Kars Atayv to the Rebbeinu Shalom is so crucially important. So, we publicly thank Hashem for all the chesed He's done for yeshiva and done for us. It's just been amazing.
beautiful, beautiful, awesome. So I want to share with you a Shavuos thought that was bothering me all of Shavuos, and it's a classical case of higati mitzati. That when you have a Torah thought that's bothering you, you can never say higati v'lo mitzati. Right? In other words, the Talmud in Megillah says, the Gemara in Megillah says that if somebody says higati mitzati, tamin higati v'lo mitzati lo tamin. In other words, if somebody tries to find an answer for something and doesn't find it in the realm of Torah at least, you don't believe them, because bottom line is if we work on something and truly put in the yigia, put in the effort, then like you said, the Rebbeinu Shalom usually helps us along to find it. And I had that in a very interesting way on Shavuos, that I became very bothered by the Rebbeinu Shalom tefillah that said at the beginning of the Torah service, right? We open the Ark, we open the Aron Kodesh, we say the Yod Gimel Midos, the 13 attributes, and then there's this Rebbeinu Shalom. And it just struck me. I had a certain question on it based on the fact that it's asking the Chayil Mabad, a Duke and the Rambam. We won't go into that, a little bit too inside baseball, but it got me wondering, where in the world does this tefillah come from? And it was very strange, because as I started to look around, I noticed that virtually every siddur, I looked at many, many different siddurim, every siddur has it in it. And many a siddurim, especially the ones with commentaries like Otzer Tefillah, etc., they often tell you where different prayers that were clearly, not originally from the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, not from the original prayer book, so to speak. They usually tell you where it comes from, and no siddur had it, and no siddur had it there. So finally, eventually I found it, and then subsequently our good friend Rabbi Davidovich pointed out to me that the Siddur Elios Eliyahu, which I know there's a family shaykhis to you from the Elios Eliyahu, because it's Rav Aaron Lapiansky, who is your son-in-law's brother's father-in-law's former roommate or something like that.
It's my
I know there's some
son's
connection.
My son's shwager, my son's brother-in-law is Yaakov Lapiansky. Ron Lapiansky.
Right. So Ron Lapiansky actually has it in there where it comes from, but I only got the sitter after I was working very hard on it, and found that it's from the Machshir the Rizal. The Shari Tshuva is the only place that quotes it. As many interesting customs that we have. By the way, that's a good yesod in life. That if there's an interesting custom that we have, chances are it's just mentioned by the Shari Tshuva. That's what I've said. I'm starting to figure that out in my life. So Shari Tshuva mentions it from Rav Chaim Vital, who mentioned it from the Machshir the Rizal. But it just got me thinking about a couple of different things. But especially when we talk about our davening, that there's some things that we take for granted. That's just it's what we say, and then we never sit back to think about where's this come from, why do we do it, and that was my lesson. One of my lessons out of Shavuos from really working hard to try to. I mean, I was looking I was ruling out different directions. I looked into Machzavitri, it wasn't there. I said, okay, so it's not old, and then I looked,
I'm sure that's not from. I can tell you that's not from the Machzavitri.
Yeah. Yeah, well, again, when I looked at Machzavitri, it was late in the process. I'd already looked at many different places it didn't find it, and I was getting a little bit it's just my lesson from that is that in life, when something bothers you, spend the time to look for it and find the source, and you can usually find what you're looking for. So in case anyone was wondering, the Rabbono Shalom that we say on holidays is from the Machzor the Rizal. That was one big thing I spent time on Shavuos. Right, I believe that if my records are correct here on our past episodes, you still had some thoughts on Rus that you wanted to share with our
Rus never ends. We're doing Rus. This whole podcast is going to be about Megillus Rus, in my opinion.
The Rus podcast, the Ruth podcast, yeah. So what stones do we leave unturned from? You know what? Actually, one second, time out. I'm gonna throw a yellow flag really quick. I did have one. I talking about admitting things publicly. I did have one thing that I had to admit publicly. So one of the things I was learning with people on Shavuos was one of just a beautiful sefer. I actually still have it here on my desk from Shavuos because, but I don't know if you've seen this before, but it's the sefer from it's Ma'oros Rambam, written by Eliezer Lachman, but based on the Torah of Shmuel Yaakov Weinberg Zatzal. And it's the first edition is everything from the Hakdama to the Yad, the Hakdama to the Rambam, and then about a year or two ago they put out one on Hilchos Talmud Torah. So these are two. If you I don't know if I can use this expression, but if you enjoy learning the Rambam, in other words, if you get a geschmack out of learning the Rambam, these are eye opening as far as things. But and one beautiful thing I saw that I'd never seen before was, and I'm guilty of saying it this way, that in my history classes, I regularly talk about how the Rambam in his introduction to the Yad has a line that essentially sounds like, if you have this sefer, you don't need any other sefer. Right? Famous line from the Rambam.
I think it's misunderstood a lot, yeah.
Exactly. So I usually say sort of tongue in cheek, like okay, I think I quote Barrel Wine that the Almighty in His infinite sense of humor made it that no book has ever spawned off more commentaries than the Yad. But Weinberg explains it actually. He says, what did the Rambam mean when he said that? Like you said, it's misunderstood. He said the Rambam has three categories. There's Torah Shebeksav, Torah Shebal Peh, and Gemara. So Gemara is a different category. He was never, God forbid, saying that once you have the Yad from the Rambam, you don't need the Gemara anymore. No, he was saying whatever the Rambam's category of quote Torah Shabbat Peh is, that is covered by the Yad.
In other words, after Shas.
Right. Meaning organizing all of the principles of the oral tradition. That's what the Rambam meant. It means this is the one book where I have, the Rambam speaking, has organized all of the different principles and foundations of the oral tradition. And of course there's a need for Gemara and still the Shakavatari and the Pilpul and everything that we do. But that's what it's just an interesting thing that I saw in there that he explained that, and like you said, it's a very, very misunderstood line. Yeah. So, but anyways,
he was Rabbi Weinberg's Chavrusa, correct? Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg's Chavrusa, Eliezer Lachman.
Rabbi Eliezer Lachman? He's the one who's, he's a young guy. He's probably maybe a few years older than you, maybe.
Probably like 5.
I know you're many years older.
He's probably 5.
I know you're many years older than me. What's that?
Probably 5-6 years older than me, I would say.
About right. He's probably about 50. I put him at maybe. But
mid-50s. But yeah, go ahead.
Right, but whatever. He's definitely out of the Talmidim in my generation. He was the one who really gained, really had it. Really had the thinking of Rav Weinberg, and that's why he's the one putting out the Sfarim, and they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. So highly recommended, and I always like to learn the introduction to the Rambam because he talks about the Masorah, the whole tradition from Sinai, and how it came from Sinai down to us, and I think it's a very apropos Shavuos learning. So that's one interesting thing that I was able to do there on
Very
Shavuos.
nice.
So anyways, Rabbi Spear, what do you have to say about good old?
Where were we up to? Where did we end off with last time? I think we left off by
It was kind of
Nami.
been all over the place. So.
We left off at Nami calls herself Mara, right? Granny Mara, and showed the greatness of Nami of accepting responsibility. I think that's the point that we left off on, right? We contrasted Nami with Eov, right? That Eov,
Right.
the whole Sefer Eov is about Eov not really, because he can't understand, he can never accept. Did I say over the idea from Rav Tzadok of shtaik, of be quiet, of silence, with Moshe
I
Rabbeinu?
don't believe so.
I don't think I
I
said
don't
it.
believe so.
The unbelievable of Tzaddik, if you look, it's interesting. In Medrash Rabbah Rus, it brings down the whole story of Elisha ben Avuya. Elisha ben Avuya is the famous character in Shas. He was a Tana, the Talmud of. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, I believe, right? And Elisha ben Avuya is Isha Laiki Mamish, and then he's one of the Arba Nichzul of Paradis. Four of the Tanaim went into the Paradis, into the field of Hashem, the orchard of Hashem. Those were Ben Zayma, Ben Azai, Rabbi Akiva, and Elisha ben Avuya. Ben Zayma, what does it mean, the Paradis of Hashem? That they're able to see some of the inner workings of how the world worked. Ben Zayma, he went insane. Ben Azai died. Rabbi Akiva was unaffected, and Elisha ben Avuya became a heretic, became an apikaris. There's a bunch of stories. It's unclear was there one thing that made him apikaris. There's a bunch of sources. There's Gemara and Kedushin. There's the Yushalmi Chagiga. There's Bavli Chagiga.
Milton Steinberg, don't forget. No, Mahavda Elif Abdullah.
There's Kahelis Rabbah and I think and Rus Rabbah. I think those are main places that bring down all the stories of Elisha ben Avuya. Very hard story to understand. And one of the things that happens is when he sees the two different Girsals, he either saw the tongue of Rabbi Yehuda Nachta and Rabbi Yehuda the baker, who was one of the great Talmidei Chachamim of that dar, or was the tongue of Rabbi Chutzpah HaMeturgeman, who was one of the people killed the Sarugei Malchus, which is part of what we read on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. And he saw his tongue being eaten. Two different Midrashim say two different versions of the story. So Elisha ben Avuya said the line, Zu Torah v'zu schayra. Is this Torah and this a reward? So did he make up that line? So really, it was not made up by him. The first makar, the first person who questioned Hashem saying Zu Torah v'zu schayra was actually Moshe Rabbeinu. Because it's a Gemara Menachos, Moshe Rabbeinu sees Rabbi Akiva and he wonders why wasn't the Torah given through him. He's so impressed with Rabbi Akiva. And when he sees the death of Rabbi Akiva, he says, Zu Torah v'zu schayra. This is the Torah and this is its reward. That Rabbi Akiva died such a horrible death. His skin was raked by Roman soldiers. So Hashem told him, Shtoi, kach al salafani, you have to be quiet. So Rav Tzadok has a beautiful explanation. What does it mean, be quiet? It means, there's two ways. One way of understanding this thing, on a simple level, you can't understand this, be silent. Right? And that's maybe the pshat. It says, Vayidaim Aaron. Aaron was quiet after the death of Nadav Avihu. I think there's another way of learning. Tzadok says there's another way of understanding to be quiet. It's if you're quiet, if instead of reacting by what you see, but instead you contemplate, you're misvainen, right? Think about how long the Bria is, right? The world is so precise. The world's been going on for 5,781 years. And at this point, obviously when Moshe asked that question, looking at Rekiv in the future, it's been going on for 3,700 years. There's so much happening, you can't possibly know. The only way you could possibly understand is by being quiet, right? And trying to make your consciousness, mavata your consciousness to Hashem's consciousness. That's the only way you could possibly do it. That's what Hashem was telling him. Not be quiet and don't have an opinion, but be mavatal your thoughts to Hashem's thoughts. And then you could possibly not understand it fully, but partially understand it. So I think this, Eov did not learn this lesson, and Nami does. Nami also understands. It's called Mimara. So she's mekabelis all the things that happened to her. They come back to Eretz Yisrael. And we're not going to spend too much more time in it. I just want to point out that Ruth goes from being a princess, and she now ends up as literally scrounging on the ground to get payah. And she has no problem with it. And she's a tznuah the whole time, and Boaz notices her. And this is just the unbelievable greatness of Ruth. I heard a great story from Shlomo Carlebach. Shlomo Carlebach was talking to a Ger Tzedek. And you can understand that Ger Tzedek would feel lonely. Right? People were nice to him, but he felt lonely. So he said to him, he said, remember something, there's two types of Jews. There's the Kabbalah Satira Jew, the Jew stood at Har Sinai, who saw Hashem speaking. He was always part of it. And that's one person that will bring Mashiach. And then there's another person called the Rus Jew, who was not there from the beginning, but who cleaved himself, he attached himself to Torah and to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and to Klal Yisrael. He goes, and that's really where Mashiach really directly comes from, right? David HaMelech comes from Rus. So he goes, you're a Rus Jew. Right? And I think that's a great way to look. Every Jew should be both. I always, we spoke about it before that Bali Tshuva have a Maila over FFBs, and FFBs have a Maila over Bali Tshuva. And a growing Jew integrates them. FFB doesn't question certain things, which is a good thing. On the other hand, a Bali Tshuva had to make a conscious decision to become from. We never had that. I saw a person, a Rav was talking about doing, I saw it put down in what's that magazine called Dialogue? Rabbi Zupnik, a Rav in Pesach, was talking about Kiruv. He was talking about one of his Baal Batim from birth. He was talking with the Rav was emphasizing we can't ignore non-from Jews. We have to tell them about Torah, right? Whenever there's not a man around, you have to become the man. Or in the words of the great Ric Flair, if you want to be the man, you've got to beat the man. So we have to become the man today. 2 million Jews know about Yiddishkeit. We have an achrayus to those other 12 million. This person was talking to a non-from Jew on the plane. Non-from Jew said to him, "When did you decide to become Orthodox?" So the from guy looked back at him and really was thinking about the question. He said, "Never." Meaning, and he was saying there's a chesron in that. If a person never consciously decided that I'm not talking about what we were born from. A lot of us were born from. But more than being born from, you have to make that conscious decision. And that's a milah that Gerim and Bali Tshuva have. And that's something that from FFBs can learn from Gerim and Bali Tshuva. And I think vice versa too. Right? Gerim and Bali Tshuva can learn a lot from FFB. I think that's the idea of the totality of Klal Yisrael. And when you read Megillas Rus, this message comes through that Klal Yisrael starts from Min HaKotze El HaKotze. On the one hand, from the family of Yehuda, of Nachshon ben Aminadav, right, Mashiach. On the other hand, they're from the family of Rus, right, the family of Eglon, the family of light, right, and this brings together, right, all people are really, and every person has to have all these things within himself, the seeker and the acceptor, and the person who has blind faith but also questions, but is makabel everything. We all have to have all these midas within ourselves, and that's what you learn from Megillas Rus, because all these ideas are brought to the forefront of Megillas Rus, ending up with the great David HaMelech.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow, that's a beautiful thing to think about. How lots to chew on there, Rabbi Spiro. I just have to chew on it for a minute. You did remind me of a.
I mentioned Ric Flair.
I like Ric Flair. I'm more of a Hulk Hogan guy. I remember once I was walking into the Cleveland airport here and actually saw Hulk Hogan. He tried to body slam me, but I ran the other direction, so I was okay. You reminded me of a couple things there. A couple of my wheels are turning. First of all, the book that we've highly recommended numerous times is the biography of Rav Noach Weinberg. And by the way, besides just the biography, I think after getting a little bit into it now, I also really recommend anything by Mosaic Press. I think that Doron Kornbluth and Rabbi Haber have done an amazing job of putting together a new printing house in the Jewish world. Did Rabbi, you didn't overlap in Buffalo with Rabbi Haber, did you? He was before you were there?
He was
way
12
before
years
you,
apart.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a wonderful printing house. But one of the things that in Rav Noach Weinberg's expanding just expanding consciousness of issues in the Jewish world and trying to tackle them, is he started the project Chazon, which was actually Danny Mechanic and Yerachmiel Milstein, yeah. And the idea is exactly what you're saying, that to reach out to the Beis Yaakov kids and the yeshiva kids and whatnot, and get them to, so as we choose to be from. In other words, the idea was take a lot of the Kiruv stuff and make it sort of translated for a yeshiva slash Beis Yaakov audience, and give it over to these kids so that they can also, quote unquote, make the choice to be from, as opposed to it being a blind faith. And it was, I don't know where that organization is today, but I remember when it started 20-something years ago, I thought it was such a wonderful idea. And just parenthetically, you reminded me of a famous idea from none other than the Ger Tzedek, from who has one of the greatest names ever. In fact, I've thought about naming one of my kids after the Ger Tzedek, but not name him Avram, like actually name him his original name, which I believe was Valentine.
Really?
Count Valentine Podolsky was his original name.
Pasky or something?
Patolsky, something along those lines. But his name was Valentine, Count Valentine. So like I'm gonna name one of my kids Valentine Landis. And who named for it? Oh, the Ger Tzedek. Wasn't he Avram ben Avram? No. He was Valentine before he was Avram. So anyhow, so a famous idea from him that they say is we have the concept of Naasev and Ishma, and the famous Medrash about how Kodesh Baruch Hu went to the different Umas HaOlam, different nations of the world, before he gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael, offering it to them. And Yishmael said, "What's it say?" And it says, "Lo Signav." They said, "No, we can't do it." And Esav said, "What's it say?" And it says, "Lo Tirtach." He said, "No, we can't do it." And again, Klal Yisrael said, "Nas and Nishma." So Avram ben Avram, the Ger Tzedek, said, it's not pshat that every single member of the nations of the world unilaterally rejected the Torah. It was the Rav. The majority said, we don't want it. But there were definitely individuals who wanted to accept the Torah. So says the Ger Tzedek, those are the ones who eventually become Gerim. So to speak, there is a little bit of Sinai, the original standing in Sinai to a certain extent inside of every single area. Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. Right, Shemai Battalion. Yeah, it had to be very close. And Rabbi Kiva, when we say Rabbi Kiva was from Gerim, also Rabbi Kiva it's a grandson of Gerim. I mean, and I'm sorry, his parents were probably Gerim, Rabbi Kiva's, for it to make sense. And if you add up, yeah, I think I wrote on this once. I have to go back and look at my articles. I wrote on the mass proliferation of Jews during Bayesheni, how we were somewhere between 6 and 8 million Jews, and that was what was it, more than 10% of the Roman Empire. They were crazy numbers, but it's which in and of itself is fascinating. Well, Nero, right? Because Nero, according to Chazal, was Megayer. Right, Nero himself converted. Right. So, well, again, but this idea that of that at the time of by Shani, let's go macro for a minute on this. That when you talk about Lahavdil, Christianity getting its hold in the Roman world, it didn't come from nowhere. In other words, there was definitely a general culture in the Roman world of, number one, paganism and polytheism being bankrupt, of the average Roman Joe or Roman whatever they call themselves, seeing that. What's that? Yeah, Julian, or the average Julian, the average Hercules, seeing and knowing that polytheism and paganism was bankrupt, and that led large numbers of them to convert to Judaism, and that's how you see this tremendous. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense. There's many scholarly articles written about it, trying to make sense out of it, and the conclusion, pretty much the only logical conclusion to show the tremendous population growth at the end of the Second Temple of the Jewish people is there was large numbers of Gerim, there are large numbers of converts at that time, which is again crazy to think about,
I mean,
especially.
just when you think about the story of Onkelos, and right, was Onkelos a crazy exception, or was it a growing problem in the Roman Empire that Akhdei Kach, the Roman emperor's nephew, or the Caesar, whatever
Mhm.
you call them, was actually becoming a Jew?
Yeah, and I think the latter is the case. It was indicative, kind of what was going on in the Roman Empire at that time, and yeah, it's a fascinating time period because you just think about like the equivalent in a modern day sense, which isn't that far off. If you want to compare apples to apples, so to speak, it's not so far off. If you look at our situation today in 2021, and where the Roman Empire was holding circa the year. It was probably after Churban Abayis, by the way, when this started, because you had the strong influence of Jews throughout Rome, because you had so many Jews now in Rome because they were first sold as slaves, and then that didn't last very long. But you imagine a situation probably not that dissimilar to what we have today, and all of a sudden people just convert, not all of a sudden, but a process of nobles converting and aristocracy
Wild.
converting.
Let's just end off with another topic, which I'm very into recently. I want to mention, all that's going on in Eretz Yisrael right now, of course, and with the recent war that happened, and
Sure.
so I'm telling you something that I'm appreciating, I'm enjoying about it. Actually, I'll tell you why in a moment. If you look at the complete emptiness and sheker of the media and their entertainment industry and the music industry, the way they look at this is obviously a lot of complexities between Israel and Palestine. It's a war that's been happening for a long time. And the way they've distilled it down so neatly and briefly into this little box. Israel came out of nowhere and threw Palestinians out of Sheikh Jarrah. Israel went out of nowhere and bombed a building in Gaza where the media was. No context, right? Zero. And you look at, I do give credit to Hamas. I give them amazing credit for being probably, someone was calling him, he said
Right.
they have perfected the art of social media influencing in a very frightening way, obviously, but they're miles ahead. The guy was talking about how miles ahead of Israel's Hasbara they are. He goes, they're miles ahead,
100%.
right? But
Hmm.
the frightening, very Orwellian of no looking at the truth, and you
Hmm.
see
Sure.
that for the most part, forget about the fact that tons of Goyim go for it, but how many Jews are going for this? I mean, they had a letter a few weeks ago, rabbinical students, obviously Baruch Hashem, no one from any from schools, but from conservative, reform, reconstructionist, condemning Israel, buying Hamas's line, hook, 100%. But why am I enjoying it? Because when we were kids, our Rebbeim in school would tell us, as I grew up, you can't trust the Goyim. The Goyim are bad. The Goyim are all anti-Semites. And even as kids in school, we'd be like, "Is that true?" You think about football players we liked, and I'm not saying every single guy is, but it's a Gemara Masechta Shabbos, Har Sinai, Har Sheyarda Sina Lailam, the mountain that brought hatred to the world. Esav Sona, Yaakov, other Makaris and Chazal for this idea to see the absolute truth. We have no friends out there. We have no complete, solid friends. You know who our friends are? Our friend is Hashem. Hashem is called Rashi. Rashi. Your friend is Hashem. Hashem is our friend. He is here with us. But our friends in this world, we have no friends. Europe, I think it's been clear for a long time already. The United States government is not our friends right now. Again, we try to stay away from politics here for now. We're not pro. We don't believe in anyone in government. Al tiskar v'lershus. But I think we just have to realize the absolute truth of
Right.
Chazal, and we just have to remember our friends are our fellow Jews and Hashem. Those are our friends, and that's what we can rely on right now. We cannot rely on the rest of the world. The incredible shallowness, the bombing of the AP building in Gaza, the incredibly shallow reaction. This is where Hamas is brilliant. As is known, they always keep their bases in children's schools, hospitals, and now in media centers. And Israel, I personally think it was a mistake. Fine, they felt they had to bomb them. And right away, Israel bombed the media center. That's it. There's zero contact. No one will say, why would Israel bomb the AP and a few other organizations' media center? What's the reason? Is there a reason? We know the reason. It's Hamas in that building, and no one cares. No one wants to look at the truth. But to me, it's reassuring. one of the Averas in Gullus is the Gemara in Psachim speaks about is why are we in Gullus so long? Because we love it here. We get seduced by our host country. It's a fact. A lot of us are seduced. I know, Lance, I know you spend a good part of your day on Instagram reading all the influencers, right? And so do I. I'm on MySpace all day being influenced by all sorts of bad people. And we're influenced by the society. We can't help it. It's nature. And it reaffirms to me this idea that Hashem is with us, but we cannot rely on anybody else. I think we've been through after the Holocaust, there's a certain great period between 1950 to 2020 where a lot of the non-Jews were on our side, and I don't think it's like that anymore. But it's a good thing because it makes us realize this is not our place. Our place is in Eretz Yisrael with a Melech, with a Beis Hamikdash, and it should remind us that this is not our home. This is not our country.
And look, along those lines, I think you see from the recent vote at the United Nations "quote-unquote" Human Rights Council, where you had many of these countries that really had been closely allied with Israel. Israel was the first on the ground when they had humanitarian crises, like the Philippines, like Mexico, who voted against Israel.
The best thing to me is when they have like the Human Rights Council. There's always countries on there. For years, Sudan was on there, right? Saudi Arabia is on there. China's, I think, has a permanent seat on the Human Rights Council, right? China. Did you see that thing going around? It said 4,000 Palestinians killed in Syria. You saw that? 20,000 killed. You know that the Turks are having a war with Kurdistan right now. No one in the world cares about it, but they're fighting each other. And Saudi and Yemen are having a war. And it said 1 million Muslims, Uyghur, how do you pronounce that? The Uyghur Muslims in China are being liquidated. No one cares. Because if all you care about is 80 Palestinians, then maybe you hate Jews. Rabbi Landis, you are on fire today. You know that?
I'm on fire. No, you're on fire.
You're on bigger fire.
How's that?
You just are.
Oh, okay, I hear. It's I think you're saying a good point that we have to. It helps us to stay focused, to realize the truth. I think the Rabbis in Gold in my ear once said something along the lines is we'd rather be unpopular and alive than popular and dead, or something like that. It's just some famous quote like that, and that's what it boils down to. But along the lines of what you're saying, I'd just like to go macro on it a bit, and at least my hope and prayer when these things happen.
That's the second time this episode you said the word macro.
Because I like the word macro. I don't know what it means, but I like it. Okay, I just like it.
We had a one-time limit, though.
No, but it makes me sound smart, so we're going to say as much as I can. But when we go macro here, we realize that we look at this and you see it's very much in lines from what Chazal say, seemingly what the Nevi'im say is what Ikvasej Mashiach, what the birth pangs of the Messianic era will look like. And I think that's the natural response. It has to invigorate our davening for Mashiach, which is a good amount of our Shemona Esrei is dedicated to Mashiach, if you think about it. You have Etzem David, you have V'li Yerushalayim, you have Ritzei, Shema Kolenu, you can throw it in for good measure. A significant amount of our Shemona Esrei is a process. I was thinking about this after the Meron tragedy, but the Shemoneh Esrei is really, it's a process of building. The brachos, you can look at it in one way, they build on themselves. And the culmination, so to speak, of Shemoneh Esrei is davening for the Geula, is davening for the redemption of the Jewish people. And we have to remember that we are a nation in exile. We're very much a nation in exile. While we do have a certain amount of sovereignty in the land of Israel, it's very far, like you said, like you addressed, from what it's supposed to be. There's no Melech, there's no Sanhedrin, there's no Beis Hamikdash, there's no Kohen, there's no, etc. We have maybe one small part of what we need in the mix, and that is the majority of the world Jewish population there. And we see these things happen, and it's a stark reminder that we're not there yet. We're just very far from being there, and we're very far from probably the most overquoted but very apropos nevuah of Yeshaya that a nation should not raise a sword against another nation, nor shall we learn more. I can't get the words out. Nor shall we learn war no more, or something like that. All right, in other words, that part of Yemos HaMashiach, part of the Messianic era, is no more war, right? No more bombs being thrown by Hamas at Eretz Yisrael. That doesn't exist. And if you really want it to end, there's a beautiful 5-minute video from Dennis Prager about how the Middle East conflict is very easy to understand but impossible to solve. Right? It's easy to understand, and that the Arabs want Israel destroyed. Groups like Hamas and the PLO and Islamic Jihad and Iran, etc. They don't want peace with Israel, right? They don't want more land. They want Israel gone, period, full stop, right? And Israel just wants to exist. That's understanding the Middle East conflict, but how are you going to solve that, right? At its core, the goals are diametrically completely opposed. You know how you solve it? You solve it with Mashiach, right? That's how you.
And it's also fascinating to me how every American president somehow gets himself involved in it, and they're not going to solve it. They won't account. Why do they even bother? But that's part of the taiva. It's what the Rebbeinu Shalom put in the world. Part of this taiva that Eretz Yisrael is the center of the world. It's amazing. We're really seeing a lot of ideas that all come true right now. Very exciting times, really. All the Yidden should be safe. Everyone should be safe everywhere. The Jews in Israel, the Jews in America. We should all be safe.
And look, and I'll say just in conclusion that this should be the end of the process. That out of everything Klal Yisrael has gone through in the past, let's say 150 years, which has been a pretty tumultuous 150 years if you think about it, probably arguably the most tumultuous 150 years in the history of the Jewish world, at least numbers-wise. At least numbers-wise, as far as the numbers of lives that have been affected in a massive way, that Abraham's little health, and God willing, we're at the end of the process finally, and that this should be the, so to speak, the last steps of the process, and we should see the Geula, B'mehera v'yameinu, we should see Mashiach. We're talking about Ruth. That's really what Ruth is about. One of the reasons that Ruth is read on Shavuos is not only that theme of we all convert to Judaism on Shavuos, but the theme of Es Tzemach David, of the Davidic line being established and being a fundamental part of Ma'amad Har Sinai is the fact that in the end of days it's going to be that house of David coming back, taking its seat on the throne of Klal Yisrael, and we should just see it happen already. That's the bottom line.
Amen. Good words, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbis. I appreciate your feedback. So with that, we are going to wrap it up. Sorry, we went a bit over here, but we want to thank you all for paying attention. Thank you for listening. Please send us your feedback. Let us know what else you want to hear us talk about, and we will look forward to the next episode. And in the meantime, have just an amazing life, and make sure that you're doing good things to help to bring about the culmination of what we're all looking for. Have a great week. Until next time.
Welcome to the guest.